May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Sonny Yisrayl, Benjamin Alexander Hawks, and I'd like to serve forever as a priest down very soon. It's now time to start finding your seats for Sabbath services.
May I have your attention, please? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. My name is Sonny Yisrayl, Yahaqob, and I'd like to serve forever as a priest starting very soon. It's now a purpose and an honor to present to you the sons and daughters of Yisrayl now reaching the sanctuary. I'd like to turn to our first speaker, Zephaniah Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. The title of my speech today is The Clean and Unclean. Yahweh tells us not to eat the unclean thing. Please turn to Leviticus 11, verse 1 through 4, and 8 through 12. Found on page 89. It says, And Yahweh spoke to Moshe and Aaron, saying to them, Speak to the children of Israel, saying, These are the animals you may eat among the beasts of the land. You may eat any animal that has a split hoof completely divided, and choose the cud. These you may eat. Their meat you shall not eat, nor their carcasses you shall not touch. They are unclean to you. These you may eat of that which are in the waters, with both fins and scales, and the waters, whether seas or rivers, that you may eat. But everything that is in the sea or the river that does not have both fins and scales, whether among all the fish that are in a school, or among all the fish that other living creatures in the water, they are an abomination, and they will be abominable to you. You must not eat their flesh, but you shall regard their carcasses as an abomination, whether is the waters not having both fins and scales is an abomination to you. Now let's name some unclean animals. The pig, the owl, the eagle, the red and black kite, the bat, the lion, the worm, the mice, the rabbit, the cat, the lizard, the dog, the rock badger. Yes, the pig you must not eat. The pig is unclean. It does not chew the cud. Now let's name some clean animals. The fish, the fish with both fins and scales, the duck, the goat, the sheep, the ox, the deer, the gazelle, and the dove. Let's not eat the unclean thing, nor touch their carcasses. You will be unclean till sunset. We are not to touch the unclean carcasses. In the 9th book of Yisrayl, part 1, chapter 21, verse 57 and 60, it says, Do not let anyone deceive you, brethren. There is nothing in the scriptures that makes clean pork, the pig, the swine. And if you want to read it for yourself, in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, verse 17, the apostle himself says, Touch not the unclean thing, and I will receive you. They twisted the words of Kepha, who they call Peter, saying, He's the Pope. And Kepha saw a vision, and it was full of unclean animals. And he said, I have never eaten anything like this. And they said, Now Here is the Savior telling Peter to eat pork. So that means that he made clean the pork, but because he said, don't call anything I've cleansed unclean. And you noticed they always have their Christmas ham. You know, this is a tradition where they follow. Well, we'll notice also that they're following the gods in this. They don't follow Yahweh who eats swine's flesh, that which is offering to the gods, Elohim. That which is an offering to the gods, not to Yahweh, now by his people, but offered to the gods. And the rodent will be consumed together, says Yahweh. We do not offer anything to the gods. We follow Yahweh and his laws. Yahweh says, if we don't touch the unclean thing, he will receive us. Please turn to 2 Corinthians 6, verse 17, found on page 904. It says, therefore, come out from among my people and be separate, says Yahweh. Do not touch the unclean thing, and I will receive you. We need to be righteous like Yahweh, and be in his kingdom. We may only eat the clean thing, and if we do not touch the unclean thing, then Yahweh will accept us. May Yahweh bless your understanding. I'd like to turn over to next week.
Praise Yahweh. At this time, we have the great privilege and honor to hear from the great deacon Melchizedek Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today, I'd like to speak a little bit about the importance of prophecy. Now, the tree of life represents the house of Yahweh that strictly teaches the 613 laws of perfection. In the same society, we also see the mixture of righteousness and evil. This is still prevalent in the world, in today's world, except today, as it was in the days of Noah. This mixture far outweighs pure righteousness. Abel was a priest of righteousness and is attested to by the inspired writers of the scriptures. We could turn over to the book of Matthew. Matthew 23, look at verse 35. It's found on page 752. It says, so that upon you may come all the blood, the righteous blood, shed upon the whole earth, from the blood of righteous Abel to the blood of Zechariah, whom you murdered between the porch and the altar. So Yahweh's established the first house of Yahweh on earth with Abel. The great work that was done at that house was still being talked about in the days of Samuel, who also was a righteous priest of Yahweh and was trained at the house of Yahweh at Abel. Okay, and if you remember in 2 Samuel 20 and verse 18, it says to receive an answer, ask it Abel, and that would settle a matter. So Yahweh allowed Abel the priest to be killed, which effectively stopped the laws of righteousness from going any further. Cain's religion, which exactly what we see in the religions of the world today, continued to grow until the earth became totally corrupt, as shown in Genesis and by the Savior. All right, so if we look over to the book of Genesis, Genesis 6. Genesis 6 and verse 11 through 12. It says, "The earth also was corrupt before Yahweh, and the earth was lawless, filled with violence. So Yahweh looked upon the earth, and indeed it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their way on the earth." And also in the book of Matthew 24, verse 37, it says, "But just as the days of Noah were, so also will be the coming of the Son of Man." So Yahweh proved his point that mankind would not subject themselves to righteousness without righteous leaders. Yahweh saved Noah and his family, and from them came men trained not able, such as Abraham, Isaac, and Yahaqob. And in Genesis 26, verse 4 through 5, it says, "And I will make your seed multiply as the stars of heaven. I will give to your seed these lands, and in your seed all the nations of the earth shall be blessed. Because Abraham obeyed my voice and kept my charge, my commandments, my statutes, and my laws." From the righteous seed of Abraham came a work and diligent teachers of the law of Yahweh. From the work of Abraham and the 12 tribes, and Abel's work, which was left on the ark, the law of Yahweh came forth, and from these laws came righteous, diligent men who spread the law and prophecy of Yahweh. Men such as Moshe, who with his team of priests wrote and taught the laws and prophecies of Yahweh at Abel after bringing the 12 tribes out of Egypt. Many righteous teachers came from those 12 tribes, including the prophets that Yahweh inspired to do great works, and to train priests and prophets. From those prophets came the writings, the warnings, and laws, the laws and prophecies of Book 1 and the Book of Yahweh. From those righteous prophets, from Abel, the house of Yahweh, came Yeshua, the one prophesied to be the Savior. All of these things were prophesied in advance, and they all came to pass. Think of how important it is that Yahweh prophesied that his work would be established where it would be, and what to look for. There are hundreds of religions dotting the earth today. The same religions dotting the land of Israel during the Savior's time. Deception was rampant even in the days of the Savior. Many of the kings of Israel were were unrighteous, and they placed the most unworthy people in office as priests. So as a nation there was little righteousness, but in Abel there was always the house of Yahweh where the righteousness was taught and practiced. It was from that geographic location that Yahchanan was trained and sent out to teach. Okay? And if we look over to the book of Luke 3. Luke 3, and starting off here on verse 1, it says, "Now in the 15th year," it's found on page 783, it says, "Now in the 15th year of the reign of Tiberius Caesar, when Pontius Pilate was governor over Judea, Herod was of Galilee, and his brother Philip was treacherous over the region," and it says of Itera, and it lists some names there. But if we look down to verse 2, it says, "And Chenaniah in the high priest in the priesthood, the word of Yahweh came to Yahchanan, the son of Zechariah, in the wilderness. And he came preaching in the region around the Jordan, preaching in the immersion of repentance and for the remission of sins, just as it was written in the book of the words of Isaiah the prophet, saying, the voice of him who cries in the wilderness, prepare the way of Yahweh, make his path straight. Every valley will be exalted, and every mountain and hill will be made low. The crooked places will be made straight, and the rough places like a plain. All the flesh will see the salvation of Yahweh." So what was Yahchanan teaching? He was teaching the laws and prophecies that he learned at Abel. All right, and if you look at Yahchanan Mark 6 and verse 17 through 18, it says, "Because Herod himself had sent and arrested Yahchanan, and had him put in prison for Herod's sake, and his brother Philip Philip's wife, for he had married her. For Yochanan had said to Herod, "It is not lawful for you to have your brother's wife." All right? So here Herod was breaking the laws of Yahweh, and Yochanan had spoken up, and so Herod had Yochanan put in prison. Okay? So these were the religious people who worshiped gods, but like the religious people today, in the days of Noah, they did not keep the laws of Yahweh nor understand the prophecies. There were religions all over Israel in that time period, but only one true work of Yahweh. People then and now assume that they could go to any region, that they could go to any religion of their choice and receive salvation. It is very important today, just as it was in the days of the Savior, that we believe what the inspired prophets wrote for our understanding. And for my last scripture, if we'll turn over to Amos 3. Amos 3 and verse 7. It's found on page 696. And it says, "Most assuredly, Father Yahweh will have no other work other than the work that he has prophesied in advance by his servants, the prophets." So with that, that's all the time I have. If everyone will please stand. I'll turn it over to the next speaker, son of Yisrayl, Deacon Yahaqob.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Today I want to speak a little bit about the race, what I started on the Sabbath before the high Sabbath. We spoke a little bit about how the race was a righteous course of life, and how a righteous course of life came up to 1074 in Gematria, and then finished the course also came up to 1074. And as you can see here, finished the course was 1074. And if you look at Acts 20 verse 24, that's where that phrase came from. Acts 20 verse 24, found on page 862. It says, "But none of these things move me, nor do I esteem my life precious to myself, so that I might finish my course," finish my course "with joy, and the ministry which I have received from Yeshua Messiah, to proclaim the message of the unmerited pardon of Yahweh." Now that's where that phrase came from. Now today I'll be speaking on these two phrases. Here's the first one: lay hold on crown, and that is 1074 if you see that. And then the next one will be cross the finish line. Cross finish line, 1074. Now, lay hold on the crown, if you turn to 2 Timothy, that's found on page 938. 2 Timothy 4 and verse 8, that's where he says, "From here on there is stored up for me a crown of righteousness, which Yeshua, the righteous judge, will give me at that day, and not to me only, but to all those who love his appearing." Now, all those who love his appearing, those will be all those who are running this race. All those running will love his appearing. Now, if you look at 1 Timothy, that's a few pages before that, 1 Timothy 6, and verse 11, you see, "A man, O man of Yahweh, pursue righteousness." That's on page 936, 1 Timothy 6, verse 11. It says, "But you, O man of Yahweh, flee from these things, and pursue righteousness, holiness, faith, love, patience, and meekness. Fight the righteous fight of the faith lay hold on eternal life, for to this you were also called, and have confessed the righteous confession in the presence of many witnesses. Now, if you see there, the verse 11, it says, pursue righteousness. Now, I looked up that word pursue in the Strong's. It's Hebrew, Greek, or a Greek word number 5343. And as you see there, it says to run. Do you see that? To run? Like running the race? Okay, it says to run away, to flee away. It also says to flee from or away. Besides its literal significance, is used metaphorically of fleeing, and then it has fornication, evil doctrine, questionings, disputes of words, envy, strife, railings, evil submissions, wranglings, and the love of money and youthful lust. So there you see part of that. Now if you look at Psalms 34, if you go to Psalms 34, this also has the same wording. That's page 446, Psalms 34, and if you look at verse 14, actually 13, it says, "Do not let your tongue speak evil, nor let your lips speak guile, treachery, deceit, and falsehood." It says, "Seek peace, pursue it, depart from evil, and do righteousness." Then it says, "The eyes of Yahweh are upon the righteous, and his ears are open unto their cry." Now if you see there, seek peace. That word, pursue it, seek peace and pursue it, is number 7291. Right here. And you see there, to run after. Okay, so there's also part of that running. Okay, we're running after righteousness. And then it goes through, it says to pursue, to follow after, to pursue after. And then it goes through this long list of stuff. And then right here it says, in a related meaning, that Hebrew word can signify to follow after. This is not with any intention to do harm as to the one pursued, but merely to overtake him. And then it gives that scripture, then look right here, it says, the word also means to follow after in the sense of practicing, or following a leader. Now when you think of practicing, what comes to your mind? Practicing righteousness. If you go to 1 Yahaqob 3, First Yahaqob 3 and verse 7, it says, "Little children, let no man deceive you. He who practices righteousness is righteous." Now remember, this is the same thing Yeshua did. Yeshua was the perfect example of practicing righteousness. Okay, he who practices righteousness. So there you see that words, Hebrew 7291, it says practicing, and then it says, or following, right here, or following a leader. Well, who is our leader in these last days? Yisrael Hawkins. If you turn to Zechariah, Zechariah 5, found on page 719. It says, Zechariah 5, verse 10, "Then I said to the Malach who was speaking with me, 'Where are they, the two witnesses going with the ephah?' And he said to me, 'To build the house of Yahweh.'" Now remember, the house of Yahweh isn't a building, it's people. Okay? The house of Yahweh's people. And who are those people following? A leader, and that leader is Yisrael Hawkins, the two witnesses. That's all I have. May Yahweh bless your understanding. If y'all please stand, I'd like to turn over to the next speaker, the great Khan, Benjamin Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, great saints. Peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Well, that must mean there was some exciting information today, right? All right. Hey, don't forget in that race, don't forget that forerunner, Yeshua. You know, the forerunner. And remember, Yahweh is leading this thing. And let's go ahead and put up the first slide just to kind of set this up. If I haven't said it, may the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. We're going to continue on our encoding in the book of Yahweh of these numbers. Remember, how many of you have got your fan and read the back of that fan with pastor on it that explains gematria? Okay, I don't see any hands up, so... But I know some of you got it because I'm at the South office and I know a lot of you have. But if you haven't, please get it. I'm going to set you up for this because if you'll notice the screen in front of you, that's Daniel chapter 12. There's not one thing missing out of that chapter right there. Okay, that's Daniel 12, the entire text in the book of Yahweh. Nothing is taken out, nothing. Because I want to show you that you can trust in Daniel. And I'm going to prove to you that it's Daniel that wrote it. If you'll look at the left number, 1841, you can drop the 0 at the end. But notice the other two numbers are very long. You really can't use them. So we're going to look at 1841 to see what it means. Can we have the next slide? Well, what did you think it meant? What did you think? Now, is Yahweh not in full control of this situation? That's right. Daniel is the author of Daniel. I don't care what the scholars say. Daniel wrote the book of Daniel, and you can trust this book. You can trust every word that is written in the book of Yahweh. Okay, now you could load that in with a King James, and I guarantee you won't get the same number. Okay, you'll get a different number. But with the book of Yahweh, it all just seems to click, doesn't it? Okay, let's go to the next slide because we're going to talk about an encoding. This is the August, or the 8th Roman month. August for those that still haven't got their calendars yet. But this is the August 2017 Prophetic Word magazines on the secrets of the gematria. Okay, and these numbers in gematria. And if you'll notice, there's a number that's encoded in Daniel, and it's embedded in a coded number. It's the embedded coded number that's in the book of Daniel. Notice 828, which is pastor's birth date, and 1074, which is pastor's tag. What a coincidence, right? It's embedded and encoded into the book of Daniel, and we'll prove it. Go to the next slide, please. It says that this number encoded, 1074, hidden in the words. Remember, it's hidden in the words. You're not going to see pastor's name and his tag number right there in front of you. It's hidden in the words. Hidden in the words, 1074. Go to the next slide, please. And it's hidden for a reason. You got to have a password because it's encrypted. Notice, encrypted message, 1074. Wow, what a coincidence, right? There's a message, there's a name, a message. I'll bet you, like Pastor told us at one time, the recipe for raising the dead is encrypted in this book. It's right in front of you, but it's encrypted so no one else that's not authorized can get the information. Can only be the authorities that Yahweh gives the authority. And I guarantee you, I know a man that has the password. The passcode, I'll tell you in a moment who has the passcode. Can I have the next slide? Another word we use for code is cipher. And in Daniel 12:10, read your screen. It says, many will be purified and made white and tried, tested, but the wicked will do wickedly. That word wicked, it means lawless. Okay, that means they don't come to services. They don't come to the house of Yahweh yet. You know, there's 2 billion that will be coming, but none of the wicked will understand. You know, none of the wicked will understand, but the wise will understand. And in Proverbs 2:7, it says, Yahweh reserves sound understanding for the righteous. He's a shield of protection to those who walk uprightly. Now notice, the word cipher means a secret or disguised way of writing a code. Okay? You'll see that word actually on the back of your fan if you'll go look at it. And who else would be able to unlock this? Remember, he reserves it for the righteous. Righteousness, 1074. And anointed for uprightness, 1074. Remember, that's pastor spoken of in Isaiah chapter 45, 44:28, or 44, at the end of 44 and at the beginning of chapter 45 in Isaiah. He anointed for uprightness. Can I have my next slide? Now decryption. It's a reverse process, which means you try to bring an encrypted message back to normal form. In other words, it's scrambled for anybody else. I remember that guy on one of the programs in the 90s where they were disparaging pastor. He says his answers sound scrambled. Remember when he said, we're the only ones on earth that keep the feast right here. And the man says his answers sound scrambled. Well, it's very plain to the righteous, right? Because you know the language. But there's some deeper things that are encrypted in this book. So decrypt messages, 1074. There's the one that can do it. He can decrypt it. Deciphered the message, 1074. Daniel passcode, 777. Now, what could that mean? We'll come back to that. Maybe not today. Daniel passcode, 777. I hope you're writing these down. Pastor said he has a great reward for those that will write this down. Come to the next slide. Here's the first page of Daniel in our book of Yahweh. It says the message is encoded in Daniel, 1074. It's hidden from the wicked, 1074. It's hidden from the wicked. Why does it say 1074 hidden from the wicked? Well, it's not talking about us being wicked. It's a teaching that pastor gave, because even his teachings are encoded into this book. Everything that man has ever taught us from the prophecies and the laws is encoded in this book. And in the books of Israel, by the way. And in every writing that you'll see in the House of Yahweh. Can I have my next slide? Let me give you an example. In Daniel 8:13, it says, then I heard one saint speaking. If you'll notice, one saint speaking is 1074. Remember the question and answer show? That word speaking meant to ask, to answer. Okay, if you go look it up. And another saint said is number 1062, which means firstborn. Remember, Yahaqob was the firstborn of the two witnesses. Okay? And something else to consider on 1062. What was taking place on the world stage on 1062? I was born a week afterwards. It was called the Cuban Missile Crisis. And pastor and his brother were preaching about how it wasn't time for that yet because certain things haven't been fulfilled. Remember the question and answer show in 1962 in Eastland, Texas. Daniel saw on TV 1074. Wow. You know, try that with your own name, or try that with some other name, or try that with anything else. You just don't get it. Now, let me show you the next slide, because we're going to talk about Oslo here, and I want to kind of give you something here. This is a recent article just a few days ago. In this magazine, the Der Spiegel magazine, actually, it's a German magazine. It's kind of like Time magazine of Germany. They used to be pro-Pope Francis. But they're running an article that says, Vatican Cardinal, Pope Francis is ice-cold, cunning Machiavellian. Well, what could that mean? I want to show you a definition here. If we can take the slide down for a second and put this up. This is very prophetic. That means cunning, scheming, unscrupulous, especially in politics or in advancing one's career. Devious, cunning, crafty, artful, sly, scheming, treacherous, two-faced, Janus-faced, tricky, double-dealing, unscrupulous, deceitful. Wait, I got another page. Perfidious, foxy, not as in he's great looking, but he's, remember what Yeshua told Herod? You tell that old fox. Wow, that's not a very great title. Well, I can see a Machiavellian is 666. You see that? And so is a cunning man, 666. And we're going to talk a little bit about something that these cunning people in the Vatican set up called the Oslo Agreement, which is a totally worthless covenant, okay? It's worthless, worth nothing. I'll prove it. Have a next slide. The Oslo Accord, 828. Oh? Really? Isn't that pastor's birthday? Isn't that one of the code numbers encoded in Daniel? And Oslo Peace Agreement, 1074. Wow, what a coincidence, right? This was before the tag number even came along, right? This was, they were shaking hands in 93. That's, to the left, you see Yitzhak Rabin. To the right, I think it's the right. No, wait. Yeah, left, Yitzhak Rabin. Middle, President Clinton. And the PLO chairman, Yasser Arafat, on the right. Look at the next slide. Worthless covenant. Just type that in. And guess what you get? You get the very word 1398, which goes to 1396, and it means make a firm. It's used in Daniel 9:27, where it says he will make a firm covenant or a strong covenant. Wow, but where have we heard that before? Can I show you another? Can I put this up here? Can you zoom in on that just a little bit? In the Mark of the Beast, page 171, Pastor tells us a strong covenant is made for a 7-year period. Okay? Then in chapter 11, on page 183, which, by the way, if you look up 1934 in Strong's, it goes to 183. Wow, what a coincidence. He says, Yael was speaking of the Great Tribulation, which starts with a strong covenant of 7 years and ends at the end of the 7 years with a great nuclear war. Now, this was written in 1976, 42 years ago. Who told you first? Can I have my next slide? Now, Oslo Accord, a false peace. It's a false peace. It has nothing to do with peace. Pastors taught us that all along. That's why you see 1074 there. That's his teaching. It's a worthless covenant. Remember the little horn? Little means worthless. They're worthless. There's nothing. Hey, by the way, these people that are trying to bring peace in the Middle East, they don't even have it. Their Babylon is crumbling, but they're trying to help these two countries? Give me a break. Come my next slide. They don't even know the way of peace. Isaiah 59 tells you. Daniel 7:25 says, and he will speak great words against Yahweh and will wear out, mentally attack, the cause to fall away, the saints of Yahweh, and think to change times, Yahweh's feast days and laws, and they will be given into his hand until a times, and then notice, and the dividing of time. Now, why does the dividing of time say 1074? Because it's the last 3.5 years cut short, and that's what the two witnesses came to teach, right? About the end, the last 3.5 years. Those days clothed in sackcloth, remember? In darkness. Next slide, please. Now that dividing of time, that number 1095 that you see over to the right, that's the word Daniel. Okay, it's the word Daniel in the Greek. Belshazzar, this is what they called him in Babylon, remember? They changed the name of Daniel because they can't stand any righteousness. But Belshazzar is Daniel. And then 1074, of course, is the tag number of the last day's witness, Yisrael Hawkins. okay, and those who work with him, bringing this last warning to the nations. He is the man who taught Daniel and all of the house of Yahweh in this last generation about the last 3.5 years, called the dividing of time, or the end. The end. Can I have my next slide? Pastor wrote a book. It was called The End. The End. Period called The End, 1074. In final 3.5 years, 1074. Reveals the end at Abel, 1074. Chosen to preach it. Pastor said in the books of Israel, we were chosen to preach the end. Chosen to preach it, 1074. Nobody else was chosen. That's why they don't know about this. Can I have my next slide? It's also a time that's cut short, 1074. The half of the 7, 1074. Half of the 7, remember, 3.5. Shortens tribulation, 1074. The Savior's going to stop it, 1074. Pastor said he's going to have to step in, or no flesh would be alive, be able to live. Next slide, please. Now, for those skeptics that think that Pastor didn't bring all this out in the Mark of the Beast, go to page 174. When I told this to Pastor, you know what he told me? He says, hey, that's 1074. Just drop the 0. Okay, so he said the prophecies fall into place. 3.5, then the midst, which we're in, which I won't say anything further. 3.5, midst, 3.5. The greatest time of trouble ever to come on this earth will come in the last 7 years of man's rule. In the midst of this week, Satan is cast to the earth. Well, the midst of the week, when did that take place? Let's go to the next slide. Y'all remember the comet Hale-Bopp? 1997. Remember peace plan started when? 1993, October. 3.5 years later, shut down, April 13th, 1997. And then along comes Hale-Bopp. Made its closest approach to Earth on 3/22. Whose tag number is that? Whose tag number? Did he have that tag number in 97? No, he didn't. But now it starts to make sense, doesn't it? Can we go to the next slide? Remember who was tagging along on Hale-Bopp? The boys will tell you more about that. Signs of the times, the end of the age ark, 1074. Notice 322, the word ark above it for Arkansas. Well, guess what? Just a few weeks ago, another comet appeared. Okay, it was called P21. P21, wow. How many years since 97? 21. So isn't this amazing? It was at the 33rd degree in the sky, where Damascus is also located on the 33rd parallel. A great sign in heaven, 1074. Signs in the heaven, 1074. Sign in the heavens, 1074. And that 717 you see where this comet set at that date means beloved Yeshurun. Beloved Yeshurun. Can I have my next slide? And this talks about it here. It says, a bright green comet will grace September skies. Comet 21P's orbital period varies between 6.4 and 6.6 years, so its perihelion, that means its closest approach to the sun, will arrive on Monday, September 10th. Perihelion 666, reach the perihelion 1074. Next slide. And then it continues in the article, the reason they call it P21 is because it's the 21st short period comet to have its orbit calculated since Halley's Comet. Okay? Now, notice, it also says it has a Jupiter lineage. In other words, they think it sprung from Jupiter. Anybody remember Jupiter? A Jupiter lineage, 1142. Remember the 1142 super confessors? 21st, 1074. It's been 21 years, and the 21st comet since Halley's Comet that's been its orbit calculated. Jorge Mario Bergoglio, 1142. Really? The Pope? Calculated the orbit, 1074. Halley's Comet, 828. Next slide. Almost done. It also says that it's going to make a special effort. He said, make a special effort to look for 21P during the morning hours of September 15th It will cross the Messier 35, a beautiful star cluster in Gemini. Yahaqob 5 was September 15th, and it came out to 666. Messier 35 and Comet 21P, 1074. We'll talk more about this later. And a cluster in Gemini, 1074. One more here. Next slide. Final slide for the day. We'll just kind of get your appetite whetted. Charles Messier, or Messier, I think it's French. Notice he cataloged 110 different sections of the sky back in the 1700s. And one of those, the 42nd entry in his catalog, is called M42 NGC 1976. Oh, 1976? Isn't that when the Mark of the Beast was written? And 42, M42, how many years ago, Mark of the Beast? Come on. Last slide. Last slide. We'll come back and visit this. There's another one coming on 11/11 this year. This was in paper yesterday. Eerie death comet with a skull face will zip past Earth on 11/11. A skull-faced death comet, 666, and the skull-faced comet, 1074. What could all this mean? Well, hang on, House of Yahweh. Hang on. If you'd all please stand, it's been a great privilege and opportunity. Oh, and by the way, there's one more coming behind the 11/11. It's going to be on 12/12. With that, it's been a great honor. If you'd all please stand as you're doing, I'd like to turn it over now to the great Kohan Yehuda Hawkins.
Shalom. Please be seated. What I'm going to talk about today, when I saw this information, needless to say, I fell out of my chair. If everybody would please turn to page 444, I'm sorry, 442, 442 in the book of Yahweh, please. We're going to look at Psalm number 23. There's something that we found this morning that I think is very important, and I hope you do too. If you want to know the title of this speech, it's going to be Psalm 23. Very simple. Let's read it as we have it. Now, this is how it was planned to go in the 11th edition. But there's going to be some more going in there besides this. Yahweh is our shepherd, we shall not want. He makes us to lie down in green pastures. He leads us beside the still waters. Yahweh restores our life. He leads us in the paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yes, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil, for you are with us. Your rod and your staff, they comfort us. You prepare a table before us in the presence of our enemies. Boy, do they hate it when we keep these feasts. You anoint our heads with oil. Remember that one. That's very important. Our cups overflow. Yahweh takes care of his own. And I pray we all get more to believing that. Surely righteousness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives, and we will dwell in the house of Yahweh forever. All right, here's the big one. The word shepherd that is written in Psalm 23, verse 1, is translated from the Hebrew word roi. This word is listed on page 1486 of volume 2 of the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, which shows this word means, as you live, you shall lead my flock, Israel. And also it means able. The words make us to lie down that are written in Psalm 23, verse 2 are translated from the Hebrew word yarabitsani. This word is listed on page 352 of the English, Hebrew, and Celtic Lexicon by William Wilson. Page 352, I said, which means Sabbath and rest. The word green that is written in Psalm 23, verse 2 is translated from the Hebrew word dashah. This word is listed on page 237 of Gesenius, Hebrew, and Celtic Lexicon by Edward Robinson, which shows this word means to bring forth or to give. The words in pastures that are written in Psalm 23, 2 are translated from the Hebrew word banaut. This word, the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, Volume 2, pages 866, and the Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament by Julius First, page 205. So this word means able. Boy, they like able in this psalm, I'll tell you. The words prepare a table that are written in Psalm 23:5 are translated from the Hebrew word torak shalayhan. These words are listed on page 1094 of a Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament of Julius First, which shows these words means to make ready, banquets, feasts. The Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, Volume 2, page 1118, also shows these words mean able. Here's able again. And here's another big one. The word anoint that is written in Psalm 23:5 is translated from the Hebrew word dashanat. This word is listed on page 478 of Volume 2 of the Dictionary of Classical Hebrew by David Clance, which shows this means the ashes of sacrificial victims. Now, what are we doing with these ashes? Does anybody figure this out yet? Well, common sense should tell you. The word dwell that is written in Psalm 23, verse 6 is translated from the Hebrew word shavati. This word is listed on page 6 of Volume 1 and page 1520 of Volume 2 of the Hebrew Aramaic English Dictionary by Marcus Jastrow, along with pages 205 and 1457 of a Hebrew and Chaldee Lexicon to the Old Testament of Julius First, which shows this word also means able or Abelin. So this is what Psalm 23 is actually saying. Yahweh says, as you live, you shall lead my flock at Abel, O Israel, and we shall not want. Has anybody run around? Remember, I've never seen somebody reference Yahweh begging for bread. Have any of you been begging for bread or hamburger buns or an extra hamburger? I haven't seen it, because Yahweh has always made sure by His own law that you would have second tithes to buy the thing or to purchase it or to donate for it, however it's set up, that you would not go hungry. And I know that's for sure. I got one yesterday. I really lived it up. I even had 2 patties on there. Plus mustard, pickles, and ketchup, and a big old order of fries. And I was ready to take a nap afterward. But the point of the matter is, we shall not want. And who is it who has seen to it that we will not want? As you live, you shall shepherd my flock, O Israel. Is there any question who the 23rd Psalm is talking about? Yahweh gives us His Sabbaths at Abel. He leads us beside the still waters. Yahweh restores our life. He leads us in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. How many of you, when you first got to know Pastor Israel, remember what did he talk about? 2 things he talked about, was it not? Which 2 words would he bring up the most? Yahweh, you got it. What's the second one? Righteousness. Yahweh and the law. That's what he would talk about. Yahweh gives us His Sabbath at Abel. He leads us beside the still waters, or peace. In other words, He leads us to peace. Yahweh restores our life. He leads us in the paths of righteousness for His name's sake. Righteousness is what? Keeping the law. Because that's what His name is all about. Because He wants you to be one of Him. Yea, though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we will fear no evil, for you are with us. Your rod and your staff, namely the priests, the brothers and sisters, the teachers, the workers, everybody pulling together, they comfort us. You learn to love your neighbor as yourself. And when one has an injury, you bind his injury. If something goes wrong, you are there for him or her. I don't want to leave our sisters out. Him or her. Make sure we got that. You prepare a feast for us at Abel in the presence of our enemies. And you know how they've walked. They have worked very hard to put many of us in prison. And they failed miserably. You anoint us with what? The ashes of the red heifer. That's in there. Our cups overflow. All of this is because of whom? Yahweh says, as you live, you shall lead my flock at Abel, O Israel. And we get all these things from Yahweh through him. Surely righteousness. Oh, our cups overflow. I always have too much second tithe, for instance. I'm not complaining, I'm just pointing out a fact here. I remember my wife said one time, you know, it looked bad the other day, but we always pull through. And I've seen many of you having the same blessing. It looked like you weren't going to make it, and you not only made it, you looked like you had won it from the beginning. Surely righteousness and mercy will follow us all the days of our lives, and we will dwell in the house of Yahweh. How long? Forever. And if it's not forever, what? That's exactly. We don't want it. You can take your Lord God. You can take your Jesus. You can take your, I'll just say, unmarried girl Mary. You can have it all. But as for all of us and our households, what are we going to do? Exactly. But that's what this psalm is about. A man named Yisrayl that will lead the flock in these last days at Abel, that Abel would be the protected place, and that through all these things you will be blessed. Look around you. How many people here are broke? Who's begging for bread? I haven't seen one of you. You serious about Yahweh? You always have something that you need when you need it. Remember, Israel, the red heifer, yes, the red heifer. All of that's in this psalm. The blessings, the cup or the second tithes, there's more than you need. The cup overflows. All of that is here. Because it says, what do you want to do? Where do you want to dwell? And for how long? Praise Yahweh. May Yahweh bless your understanding. And while you're at it, it says, of course, in many scriptures, pray and be humble to those that are chosen by Yahweh to be an authority over you, no matter who you are. We are all, because of Yahweh, creatures of duty, or to be humble to somebody in authority over us. Please, humble yourselves, be thankful, so that those in authority, like Pastor, can be thankful too. That's what the Apostle Shaul wrote. I pray you understand it. And now I turn the services over to the great Kohan Elia Hawkins.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. You may all be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. Now, of course, we go into the news and realizing a lot of prophecy taking place before our very eyes, things that Daniel longed to know about, and of course, Pastor informed him of these things, and we're actually getting to see them come to pass. And keep in mind, this last week, all of these leaders were at the UN General Assembly, and remember what Pastor brought about this unity and how Yahweh created waterways to where if unity was used, every country could benefit. But when they come out of this unity, when they fall away from this unity, or they can't come into an agreement in any which way, shape, or form, and it's usually over money, they start shutting down waterways. And Pastor brought out about the Sea of Azov, and that's over with Russia and Ukraine. And it shows how Russia, they didn't just block the waterway, they built the bridge to where you can't get a port ship under that bridge anymore. And they built it going from Russia to Crimea. Now remember, Crimea left Ukraine and came back into Russia under control of Russia, and that's where they built that bridge, and it shut down that area. Now, you also see this taking place with the Strait of Hormuz, where the United States and Iran is arguing over. United States wants to shut down Iranian oil. Iran says, if you try to shut us down, we'll shut down everybody. No oil will pass through here. But if they had the unity that Pastor talked about, they would be able to use it, and everybody rejoiced. But of course, while they're at the UN this week, it was just a tit-for-tat, arguing, complaining, griping, moaning, and no problems being solved whatsoever. But you'll see this bridge, and it shows it. And it also shows how the Russian submarines, a brief article showing how there's more been detected off the east coast of the United States now than in the past 25 years. They say since the Cold War. And then also showing in Syria. Remember, they're building up for Syria. Now, a Russian jet was shot down, and they're tying that back into Israel because Israel carried out an airstrike. And then it kind of cloned itself over a Russian jet to where when the missile was shot at the Syrian jet, it took out the Russian jet. And Russia is using this to load Syria down with anti-missile defense systems. Now, this was something the United States was very upset about when it came out a few months ago, but now Russia is using this to put them in. Of course, they're preparing for war. Remember Idlib, just because we're not hearing about it in the news right now, they called that the final showdown over there, and they're calling about these chemical attacks. And remember what the United States said. Secretary of State Nikki Haley, the UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said, we're locked and loaded. We're ready to go. One gas attack, and we're going to shoot more missiles. Remember, they shot them last time at Damascus. Well, it shows how Russia has warships off the coast of Syria, and so does the United States. And then China and these trade wars. This is something that's interesting because if you want to affect world leaders, you have to make the people disgruntled. And if you think these tariffs that they're throwing against each other, the U.S. throwing $60 billion or $200 billion, China throwing $200 billion, if you think the government's paying those tariffs, you're wrong. You're going to pay those tariffs. And if you have a business and you buy wholesale products, you're already getting emails letting you know your product is going up 10% this month and 25% by the first Roman month of next year. And they're letting you know that so you can prepare. You can either up your price or lose your profits. But you as a business person have to decide because we're passing this along. And the consumer, which is us, we're the one that gets stuck paying it. Now, the hope is, China's hope is, you'll scream at Donald Trump enough to get him out of office, and that way they can go back to what they were. But, of course, everything is collapsing. And remember, if you don't remember what Pastor said about trade wars, look it up in Yisrayl said. He said that these nuclear wars will start with trade wars. Remember, the love of money is a root of all evil. It's a root. It actually starts this disgruntled part of a person. And then, of course, Iran and the United States going tit for tat there at the UN, accusations flying. Iran referring to the United States as a bully, a global bully, actually trying to gather. Remember, you have Turkey is gathering to Iran, Russia gathering to Iran, Syria gathering to Iran, China gathering to Iran. All of these things pastors brought about. Malachi Martin spoke about how there would be this strategic partnerships in these last days. They would all be joining in partnerships, trying to combat, as the news says, the most powerful war machine on the face of this earth. Now, as this week went by, a lot of things in the news, Congress very quietly passed a $670 billion defense bill. $670 billion defense bill. Just imagine what kind of war, how many lives can be taken with $670 billion. Now, while all this was taking place, you also had people, other leaders, stepping up talking about the two-state solution. The president of France, Emmanuel Macron, Remember, he came to meet with President Trump. He's also part of the EU, the European Union. That's one of the 4 members of the quartet. He says that the only way is a 2-state solution. There's no alternative. And then we end up with President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu in the interview they did, where watch the camaraderie between them. And watch what President Trump says. Listen carefully to what he says, where he says that we threw Israel a big piece. They got a big piece of this. Now it's time to throw Palestine a bone, so to speak. What they're doing, President Trump referred to this as nothing more than a real estate deal. And that's how he's looking at it. And of course, he's throwing things up against the walls, so to speak, to see what sticks. And they're negotiating. Well, of course, this negotiation is going to get right back to what Pastor brought with the dividing of Jerusalem. And one thing to show you real quick, just to show how all this ties in together. Now, of course, the great Count Benjamin just spoke about a lot of this. But if you remember, you see Mahmoud Abbas, Yasser Arafat, Shimon Peres, who signed as Yitzhak Rabin confirmed this covenant. But that was the 4 parties that were there for the signing. This is Warren Christopher. That was the Secretary of State. And, of course, you have President Clinton. And this was a representative of Russia. But if you take the 4 names of the people that signed it, of course, Abbas, Rabin, Peres, and Arafat, well, of course, you would have to come to 1074, wouldn't you? Showing once again how Yahweh tied all of these things into the one who showed Daniel how these things would be. At this time, if we could please go ahead and play the news.
Pay close attention. The news you are about to see is fulfilling Bible prophecy.
Welcome to another edition of YPN News, bringing you the news that relates to Bible prophecy and foretold by Yisrayl Hawkins. Well, in the news this week, we've had the UN General Assembly, so a lot of leaders have been able to voice their disapproval of one another. President Iran being one of them, telling the United States president to stop bullying. We also have in the news this week another leader, President Macron, saying that for there to be peace in Israel, we need the 2-state solution. So those details and also some more on Syria and the false flag chemical attack that they continue to say is about to take place. But first, Ukraine's commercial shipping industry has been hit hard this summer as the ports where cargo would be received and sent out are vacant of ships. Now, one port worker in Mariupol told TRT World News, "It's summer, the peak of the working season, but we don't have any ships to work with." Now, the cargo is there with cranes waiting to load it, but he says the ships have become, quote, very rare visitors to our port.
Wow. Well, the port of Mariupol used to be constantly busy, but it started to slow down back in May when Russia completed a 19-kilometer bridge over the Kerch Strait, which is the only route into the Sea of Azov, where Ukraine's ports are located. The bridge's arches are too low for some larger ships to pass under, and in this way, Moscow is being accused of restricting vessel size into the sea.
Right, you kind of had to figure they realized that when they built it, the large vessels wouldn't be able to go underneath the bridge. Well, in addition, any ships that could make it under the Russian bridge are subject to lengthy border checks by Russian officials. Now, sometimes the process can take up to 5 days. The result has been a significant drop in shipping traffic and, in turn, economic losses for the country.
Well, in the eastern part of the country, Ukraine forces have been at war with Kremlin-backed rebels for years now, which has killed 10,000 people. Kiev, the European Union, and the United States says Russia is now deliberately trying to blockade Ukraine by, 1, expanding its military presence in the Sea of Azov, and 2, escalating tensions through economic pressure.
Well, President Putin maintains that Russia's actions are solely for the purpose of maintaining its own security. But the Sea of Azov has been extremely important to Ukraine's economy ever since the government lost control of the port of Sevastopol, located on the Black Sea, back in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea. Now, the Kerch Strait then became a crucial route through which 80%, yes, 80% of Ukraine's exports pass.
Yeah, so that's definitely putting a huge, like you said earlier, economic pressure on the countries, because they depend on, things being exported as well as things being imported to the country to keep their economy flowing. Well, places like Mariupol and Berdyansk began to receive cargo traffic that previously went to other Ukrainian ports in the peninsula. So at this point, the conflict is an economic one, but as both sides continue to increase their military presence in the Sea of Azov and no resolution has been agreed upon for the Kerch Strait, there are fears it could escalate into something much worse.
Well, the United States also is concerned about Russia's naval buildup. Top Pentagon officials are warning the Russian Navy hasn't operated at such high levels since the Cold War. Thus, the U.S. believes they need to take countermeasures to protect their interests. Admiral John Richardson of the U.S. Navy referred to the high level of Russian submarine activity in the North Atlantic as being, quote, more than we've seen in 25 years, end quote.
Well, moving south now to Syria, President Bashar al-Assad said his military is ready to take back the last remaining rebel-held territory in the country, that of Idlib. While the capital, of Damascus has been sending out additional forces to the front lines of Idlib, they are still saying they would like to try to reconcile with the other side if they are willing. But leader of Tahrir al-Sham, the major militant group controlling the province, has warned other factions not to participate in any talks with Damascus.
At the same time, the Kremlin says they have intelligence that jihadists are preparing for and intend to stage a chemical attack, which they plan to blame on the Assad government once again. And we've mentioned this several times already. It's yet to take place, but they continue to say that regardless of who does it, it's going to be Assad's government at fault.
That's right. Well, in a statement to RT, Russian Defense Minister Igor Konashekov said a strike on Kafir Zeta using poison-laden missiles is planned within the next 48 hours. Thus, some players outside the region are preparing yet more provocations on Syrian soil involving chemical weapons, with the aim of destabilizing the situation there and undermining the positive dynamics of the ongoing peace process.
Moscow also warns the White Helmets, who are known to be a pro-rebel group, will be on the scene of a chemical weapons attack first with cameras and tweets as they have in the past. And of course, the United States and its allies are already prepared for a retaliatory strike on Syria should such a report be spread.
Well, a national security advisor to the President, John Bolton, told the press last month, we now see plans for the Syrian regime to resume offensive military activities in Idlib province. We are obviously concerned about the possibility that Assad may use chemical weapons again. If the Syrian regime uses chemical weapons, we will respond very strongly.
Well, not only is the rhetoric getting stronger, but the Mediterranean Sea is getting hotter. Recently, another American guided missile cruiser packed with Tomahawk missiles arrived in the area along with U.S. strategic bombers. Now, the Russians, too, are actively moving more ships into the Mediterranean, and it is even thought they have sent submarines.
Well, it looks a lot like what occurred right before April 14th of this year when America, France, and the UK launched strikes on Syria after reports of a chemical weapons attack. Now, during the strikes, airports, military, and civilian objects were targeted, 103 missiles fired, and 71 intercepted.
Wow. Well, for more on the Syrian crisis, we now turn to our field correspondent, Larry McGee, who has the details on the recent downing of a Russian fighter jet and what Moscow plans to do about it. Larry?
There are serious questions as to what might have taken place with the Russian jet recently shot down over the Mediterranean Sea. But in a telling move, Russia has announced that it will be furnishing Syria with a S-300 surface-to-air missile defense system. Russia's Ministry of Defense says they believe that the move will cool some hot heads and prevent any further ill-judged moves in the future. Otherwise, he says, Russia might be forced to respond in the moment. Moscow believes that Israel violated bilateral agreements by only giving a mere minute or so warning before attempting a strike against Syria's Air Force. The S-300 missile defense system boasts a number of different features, including the ability to integrate and unify Syria's air defense network, and also it reportedly has the ability to identify friends or foes, which works to reduce or eliminate incidents of friendly fire. Moscow says the protection of its troops in Syria has been given top priority, and that goal can only be accomplished by improving Syria's air defense system and providing it with centralized control. Moscow says it's not sure what prompted Israel to cross the terms outlined in their bilateral agreement, especially at a time of heightened tensions, and Israel so far has not responded. The ominous trade war increasing between the U.S. and China has seen both sides responding with retaliation with tit-for-tat tariffs, and China is the latest one to return a blow. In an effort to justify its punches, however, Beijing is accusing the U.S. of bullying and is attempting to raise awareness among Americans of the economic impact the back and forth is having on U.S. citizens, farmers in particular, by running ads in American newspapers. Beijing says soybean farmers are being hurt heavily. The current president's administration is reported to be preparing $12 billion in relief for the nation's growers. The current administration is at the same time leveling accusations of tampering and interference against the Asian powerhouse related to upcoming elections in the United States in November. President Trump says China doesn't want him to win because he is the first president to challenge China on trade. And according to the president, America is not only challenging China, but it is also winning. For IPN News, I'm Larry McGee. The time, Jeff. Back to you.
Interesting that we see the economic pressure being put on China by the United States, but also their retaliatory sanctions on the United States by China. And now the same threat we see taking place with China that, if you remember previously, was the same accusation against Russia with them meddling in the elections. And of course, after that, even more sanctions were put on Russia to try to put a little pressure on them to, you know, make life a little more difficult. So it'll be interesting to see how these things play out, because the United States relies on a lot from China.
Absolutely.
And of course, as it is the case with many situations, the citizens are the ones to pay for these back and forth sanctions.
Right.
Well, the president of Iran, Hassan Rouhani, is going through some tough times as the people of his nation want him to stand up against verbal attacks from the United States. But his goal is to prevent military confrontation with the world's most powerful country. Now, he said in an address, "Our intent is to ensure that the U.S. abides by laws, stops bullying, stops pressuring, maintains commitments, keeps promises that they sign on to, and adheres to UN resolutions. We say do not sanction illegally, unfairly, and unjustly. We say the sanctions of the United States are inhumane and they must stop bullying the world."
Well, Yemen's president, Mr. Mansour Hadi, told the UN's General Assembly that Iran must stop meddling in its country's affairs. He said at that address, "We are still in the grips of a war that was imposed upon our people by armed militias that are supported by Iran and Hezbollah. They are supported financially, through the media, and militarily. These militias are extremists. They employ gangster-like tactics."
Rouhani denied all those allegations, along with those of him sending weapons and fighters to support Syrian President Bashar al-Assad. But he was excited about the support that he got from the EU, Russia, and China. Now, some are wondering how long that support will last as the U.S. boosts diplomatic pressure on other nations.
Well, President Trump recently addressed the UN General Assembly and warned leaders of the world not to support a dictatorship regime. It was definitely a battle of words as the two presidents, Trump and Rouhani, spoke just hours apart from each other. Now, Trump said Iran's leaders sow chaos, death, and destruction. Rouhani hit back by saying the U.S. is enemies of peace and perpetrators of war. Now, President Donald Trump does not approve of the Iran nuclear deal instituted by former U.S. President Obama.
According to the president, Mr. Trump, he said that the Iranian government exploited the agreement to dodge sanctions, he said, continue fooling its people and expanding its toxic influence in the region. Now, Tehran is blaming Washington for threatening or treating agreements like rubbish and are not ruling out coming back to their nuclear programs as a measure in response. Well, the U.S. is bent on teaching Iran a lesson. In New York, the U.S. Secretary of State and National Security Advisor are going from event to event, hopping from one event after another, making open threats against Iran and anyone who even dares not only work with them, but even talk to them.
Wow. Well, at one of the events, Mike Pompeo was heckled by a protester who was quickly ushered out. Now, the protester said, "Stop the warmongering and peace with Iran." While the guests at the event booed her, telling security to get her out, Pompeo said that we must put pressure on the regime to rein in its destruction and to demand that Iran act like a normal country. John Bolton said at that same event, "If you cross us, our allies, or our partners, you harm our citizens. If you continue to lie, cheat, and deceive, yes, there will be hell to pay." Now, those statements were met with applause from the audience.
Well, political analyst Shabir Hassanali said in an interview with RT that, "I think Trump is playing a game where everyone is wrong, everyone is bad, everyone is ripping America off, and only Trump is right. America is essentially the empire, and it attempts to control a large part of the world, and when any country tries to become independent, they immediately become the enemy. This is a threat. Do not oppose me," and he's saying that referring to the United States of America.
Well, if the recent speeches at the UN General Assembly was any clue to you as to how relations are among the nations, how about this recent event? Now, Capitol Hill has been busy passing legislation. Recently, they passed a $670 billion spending bill.
And we know, as times have we've mentioned in the past, they've dumped a lot of money into the military. And they have plans for even more going into the military as they look forward into the future. And so it doesn't seem like the United States is really preparing for peace because, we can see and you can hear from the testimonies of a lot of the leaders from the different countries that when they do come to their area, they kind of leave it in turmoil, kind of leave it in worse shape that it was. So, that money is being there, but it's not actually bringing forth the peace that the nations are desiring to see.
And remember also the report that we mentioned on the last broadcast, where just because they spend sometimes twice or three times, four times as much as other countries, doesn't mean, and that's what that report was saying, they're not necessarily predicted to win should they have a battle with Russia or China or something like that. So, all that spending there, the U.S. hopes to be on top, but not necessarily going to be the case.
And we know there are no winners when it comes to war. Well, at that UN Assembly, French President Macron spoke on the issue of peace in the Middle East. In his address, he said, "What can resolve the crisis between Israel and Palestine? Surely not unilateral initiatives and not trampling on the rights of the Palestinian people to legitimate peace, nor underestimating the Israelis' rights to security. There is no credible alternative to the two-state solution, living side by side in peace and security with Jerusalem as its capital." So we can see the French president backing the same thing that President Trump is also pushing in that region right now.
Right. Well, lastly, let's take a look at a video of President Trump and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu in New York recently as they discuss Israeli-U.S. relations and the goals for the future.
The American-Israeli alliance has never been stronger. It's stronger than ever before under your leadership, and I look forward to working with you and your team to advance our common interests, security, prosperity, and peace with Israel's neighbors and for the region. And we can do it with you.
There's nothing I would rather do than see peace between Israel and the Palestinians. I think lots of good things are happening. It will take a little time, as you know. It's taken plenty of time, many decades, and nothing's happened. But a lot of good things are happening. Actually, by taking off the table the embassy moving to Jerusalem, that was always the primary ingredient as to why deals couldn't get done. Well, now that will also mean that Israel will have to do something that will be good for the other side. We're working on deals. I think that I really believe something will happen. They say it's the toughest of all deals. When they talk about tough deals, they always say Israel and the Palestinians. That's the toughest of all deals. It is a dream of mine to be able to get that done prior to the end of my first term. I don't want to do it in my second term. Well, that's a big chip that they got. I took probably the biggest chip off the table. And so obviously we have to start, we have to make a fair deal. We have to do something. Deals have to be good for both parties. Otherwise you don't have a deal and you don't have a lasting deal. So something will have to be done, but that's a very big chip. Israel got the first chip, and it's a big one. There's no question about it. I like two-state solution. I like two-state solution. I like two-state solution. Yeah, that's what I think. That's what I think works best. I don't even have to speak to anybody. That's my feeling. Now, you may have a different feeling. I don't think so, but I think two-state solution works best. I would say over the next 2 to 3 to 4 months, something like that. That would be the time that I'd like to at least release the plan. It is a very complex situation, but I think we have some brilliant ideas that have never been thought of before, ideas that are good for both parties. And again, it has to be good for both parties.
Well, it's interesting, we see friendships being made with certain countries while enemies are being made out of other countries. And of course, we know that some of the big players or key players in what we see taking place primarily in that area around the river Euphrates in the Middle East there, with China, Russia, Iran, of course Turkey. We didn't have anything on that, but we've had, they're going through some issues right now. And of course, Big Brother, so to speak, being involved in all these situations and really kind of stirring up the pot with a lot of the rhetoric, a lot of the threats, a lot of the sanctions. It's really not moving us any closer to finding a peaceful resolution that an agreement that everybody can agree with and everybody can go home with a smile on their face and benefits for all the citizens.
Right. Absolutely. If you'd like to find out more about these stories, you can contact the House of Yahweh, and when you do, don't forget to request your free copy of the Prophetic Word magazine and monthly newsletter. Here's how. To contact the House of Yahweh, you can write them at the House of Yahweh, P.O. Box 2498, Abilene, Texas 79604. You can call them at 1-800-613-9494. Visit them on any of their websites, Yahweh.com, YisraelHawkins.com, Yahweh'sBranch.com. You can also visit our website at YPNnews.com. If you would like to email the House of Yahweh, you can do so by going to info@Yahweh.com. Also, any international calls, please call the number that's on your screen now. And once again, don't forget to check out the Yisrael Says program by going to YisraelSays.com and the Ask Yisrael program by going to AskYisrael.com. They're guaranteed to give you loads of information on any scriptural question you may have. Just go to the search bar, punch in what you're looking for, and watch pages and pages of results come up. You can spend hours reading through the answers that are found in those two great programs.
Well, don't go anywhere. Up next, Yisrael Hawkins bringing forth true solutions to today's problems, along with the peace that everyone is looking for. For all of us here at YPN News, I'm Katan Alexander.
And I'm Jeffrey Heimerman.
Thank you for watching.
Everyone will please stand. Now, did everyone hear him say the next 2, 3 to 4 months? All right, at this time, I would like to introduce the greatest teacher in the world, the great Kahan Yisrael, Abel Hawkins.
Hey, Yahweh, you see this, Yahweh? Oh, boy, this is beautiful. Praise Yahweh. You may be seated. May the peace of Yahweh be with each and every one of you. I was just going to ask, were you surprised to see now the peaceful solution? This is the peaceful plan signed in 93 that we brought out in the book in 1976. See, that's almost 20 years later that this peaceful solution was signed. After we brought it out, then it was signed several years later. Then it was shut down, just like prophecy said it would be shut down for a certain time period. And then prophecy shows it would start again. And what is the news talking about? The peaceful solution, and this time it's going to reverberate throughout the world. Oh boy, I think that's beautiful. Prophecy fulfilled. Nobody can foretell prophecy. No one has ever proved they can foretell prophecy. They can foretell it, but it's not true. But Yahweh can foretell it, and every word of it is true. That's what's on trial now, as shown in Revelations 13:10. The house of Yahweh, for the newcomers here, and those listening to me out there, the house of Yahweh is a learning process. It's when you enter the gates, or before you enter the gates, you start learning about the name Yahweh, and you start thinking about the prophecies. Then that's what's brought to show you can trust Yahweh being fulfilled, and of course, it being in the news right now, you can see that this is going to be done. The peaceful solution screens, if you read them yet, there'll be more going up. We got much more, but if you start in the center of the sanctuary outside and read those, it'll show you salvation was shut down. In Genesis, the 4th chapter, you can see it shut down. And prophecy shows, Genesis 49, it won't be offered again, it won't be brought back again until the last days when Yahweh's house is established and will never be shut down again. That's the words of Yeshua. Of course, in Matthew 16:18, the gates of hell won't prevail against this one. Yahweh allowed it to be shut down before. He allowed Abel to be killed. Think of this, Satan and her gods, they knew the plan of Yahweh, and they killed Abel. She must have been laughing so hard, her sides was hurting her, thinking that she stopped the plan of Yahweh. Of course, the plan of Yahweh is given in 1:26, Genesis 1:26. I'll make man in my image, and I'll give him authority. That's what he's going to do. Then he lays out his plan for us in writing. In writing. So we can read exactly what he's going to do. We can read the news and see that it's being done already. In Psalms 23, this, if you paid any attention to the great Kohan Yehuda, this should open the gate to see that you never get caught up on these scriptures. You never quit learning. If you just, and the people who leave and go somewhere place else for 6 months, they come back And the house of Yahweh has grown so much in knowledge, they'll never catch up. And those who are here and not studying like they should, you'll be getting behind, and it'll get to where it don't make sense to you. You really need to make this first in your life. Seek first. That's it. Seek first the kingdom of Yahweh and His righteousness. The rest of this will be added to you. Everything, including eternal life. But that Psalms 23, it doesn't change the translation we have in the book of Yahweh, but as is so often comes out in Hebrew, this is a secondary thing that's shown there, but it's hidden. The translators didn't understand it, so they didn't translate it, but the great Yehuda Hawkins understood it. and I called him the other day and I said, I don't remember when, but I said, there's something hidden here. It doesn't, and I told him about the word oil, and I said, this just doesn't make any sense the way it is, and what oil is he talking about? Is this the oil that comes forth from the two witnesses shown in Zechariah 4 and 5, in Revelations 11, the two witnesses and their golden oil? Well, we'll come to find out. Yes, it does mean that, but it means also the ashes of the red heifer is going to be brought back in this generation. That's life. Life brought back in this generation. And of course, here it is. You can see it. We're doing it right now. Well, Yahweh's plan of creation, mankind is on trial. Yahweh is on trial. His plan is on trial in heaven and earth. He laid it out in black and white for them, for everybody. The plan, I'm going to make mankind in my image, and the whole scripture from Genesis to Revelations is talking about that. Now, Genesis 49 shows when he will actually finish that work of making mankind. We are the ones that will receive it first. The last is going to receive it first, and that's just right around the corner, man. That's, as you can see in the news, it's not far off. But that plan is going to be completed with the seventh Moloch. Remember Revelations 10:7? That's the finishing work, where mankind, what was promised to him in Genesis 1, is going to be fulfilled, and the book of Revelations is the one that tells about it, and it actually shows the when, and I know you didn't see it yet, you didn't discover it yet, but it's in that verse that we brought out, and running the race. Well, of course, Revelation 13:10 also displays that, the race we are running, and what it actually means. But it actually shows you in that verse when this is going to be instituted in Yahweh's work, and Yahweh's work has got to be there for it to be instituted in that work. Well, Yahweh wants you to understand that He had everything concerning His plan written, so they couldn't deny what He's going to do. It's missing, it's hidden sometimes to protect it from Satan, but it's all going to be revealed in this era, where Yahweh Himself is guarding His house. That's Zechariah 9. Don't forget any of these things. He's guarding His house to keep the same thing from occurring that occurred in the other 5 works of the house of Yahweh, 6 works. We are the 7th work, the light that never goes out. Isaiah 34:16, He promises you, not one of these prophecies will fail. Not one. Now, He's put His word out to heaven and earth. If they failed, where would that put Him? They're not going to fail. Not one single prophecy is going to fail. He set the judgment, and it's shown in Daniel 7. Let me read this first, Revelations 13:10. If a man has an ear, let him hear this. It's very important. He who is for captivity is going to be killed or put into captivity. He who is for war is going to be killed by war. That's a must. It's a must for this to be done. It's taking place right now, right in front of your eyes, in that fourth part of the earth. In exactly that fourth part of the earth, only right now, that fourth part of the earth, is taking place. Captivity, and also being killed by war. That word sword there, it actually means war. If you look it up in Strong's, it means war, fighting. Herein is the patience of the patience and the faith. Herein is the patience and the faith that Yahweh gave in the beginning. The whole plan of salvation. Well, now that's enough there. You'll have to get this other in your mind before you can understand that fully anyway. But you will understand it, hopefully, before the feast is out. Let's turn over to Daniel here, because here's the final judgment, Daniel 7, and it actually involves the four horns of the golden altar, the quartet that is doing all the slaughtering. We have that golden altar ready now, and I think I can stand it if you men want to get it for the next service. The killing is what gets me. But now 7, I'll get my mind off of that. I don't want to start that again. But in Daniel 7 here, chapter 2 is when he showed these first beasts now coming up. Got that? Chapter 2, the first beast coming up, the governments. Now these are of the Nimrod military school of training. That's what we see throughout the world today. Training for military. And now it's both women and men. They're fixing to start drawing in to this military. These are the first ones that came up. And they showed which ones would come up here, here, here. They're all out of the tribe of Israel, as I showed you in the last sermon. He's not dealing with anyone else. He's dealing with the 12 tribes. The 3 million people he brought out of Egypt. They didn't come out of Egypt, but he brought them out of Egypt. Their hearts and minds were still in the God worship. And that's what is shown throughout the Holy Scriptures. But from Abraham's seed and genes, you are here. You wouldn't be here if it wasn't planted somewhere in those genes of yours. And that's the way he guides and recognizes his people and calls his people. It's all set. I brought this out in the microorganisms years ago, but your genes, if you put yourself in the place of a cow, that cow started with a bug, a little germ, a little living cell. It started with a living cell that you can't see with your naked eye. And in that living cell, Yahweh put a code. Call it a code of law. Now the cow, I'm talking about a cow and a bull. Between the cow and the bull, they produce a calf from that cell that you can't see. You can't even see it. It's so small. But that's Yahweh's doing. The closest thing to man's understanding now, they have computer chips that are so small you can barely see them. I mean, place them on your finger like that, you know, and that thing runs the world, just about. I was told yesterday that they couldn't get a car started, and because of a computer chip in the key. And you could actually key this key this key with that computer chip to where if you loaned it to your son, he could only drive it a certain speed. It wouldn't go any faster. He could only have the radio on at a certain height. It wouldn't go any higher. If he couldn't use the telephone inside the car, or the car would shut down. Now, if he tried to change any of this, the car would just shut off, and he couldn't even start it. Now, all of that is in the key. A little bitty chip. Well, think of this now, when Yahweh created you. Now, or the cow. He created the cow, a one little bitty cell that you can't see with your naked eye. And in that, he programmed that cow to eat grass and enjoy eating grass. Grass, weeds, leaves, and so forth. To put on meat for you to eat, because it was made for man. Put on meat for you to enjoy. To give you milk for you to drink. So you could make cheese out of the milk and clabber milk. Oh boy, getting your taste buds up here now. That's another kingdom inside your mouth. Microorganisms that you can't see. He made that cow to do all these things and enjoy every minute of it. And he programmed it into this key, into this one little cell that you can't see. That's Yahweh's creation. Now, if you're not too stubborn and bullheaded, you can achieve that. That's what Yahweh said in 126. I'm going to give to man this authority. I'm going to make him in my image, in my likeness. He's going to have my authority. And he said this to heaven and earth. And he said, they're going to rule like I rule. And he said, they will put a stop to war. All of that is in your gene. Now, you can discard it. It's up to you to accept it. You can discard that and throw that gene away, or you could let it grow and feed it. You know what it feeds on? Guess. You know what it feeds on? You can't see it. You can't see it. You can't see it taking place from my head to your head. But it's going from my head through my mouth to you, entering into your ears and into that brain right there. And to what you do with it is your doing. But you have the opportunity to have this kind of power, brother. You have that opportunity. Now look with that in your mind. Look here at Daniel. Because in Daniel 2, he starts showing in a dream, we'll get back to that later, but it was from the 12 tribes of Israel, all of these 4 kings coming up from the 12 tribes of Israel, no one else, no people coming over the mountain that they didn't know who they was, but they called them Gentiles. This is all nonsense put out by Christianity and the Pope. But look at verse 26 here. I'll skip a bunch of it, but this is what you'll find when you study this. Verse 26, he says, and this is the finishing product right here. Can you read it? But the judgment is set. The judgment is set already. It was set in the beginning. The plan was in the beginning. So we know that verse is mistranslated with the word will. It's actually, the judgment is already set. It was set in the beginning. In the beginning, and they will take away his government. That's the one that it shows you here earlier, the one that comes against Yahweh, his name, his laws of righteousness, and so forth. But the judgment is already set at that that they will take away his government. That is governments. That's a plural, should be plural. To consume and to destroy it completely. Well, of course, that's what Malachi said in chapter 4. It's going to leave them neither root nor branch when this thing is over. That's what Revelations 13:10 says. This is a must. Why is it a must for them to kill themselves? They got to prove to themselves Yahweh is right and they are wrong. Yahweh is right, Satan and the gods are wrong. It's a trial, Yahweh versus Satan and the gods. And it's a trial that he says, I'll do this with mankind. And this is the way I'm going to do it. And I'll write it out. I'll have my prophets write it. I'll inspire man to do everything to bring himself forth to be like me. Now that's what he's laid down for heaven and earth to see. Yes, praise Yahweh. Destroyed completely. Then the kingdoms, now notice it's plural now. See, so you see these mistakes, and the more you study, you see the mistakes that they make. Then the kingdoms and the governments and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven will be given to the people of the saints of Yahweh. That's the finishing product. That's going to take place in this generation. In this generation, you're the first to receive it. You're the first to receive it, if you will receive it. Whose kingdom is, like Yeshua said, hell is not going to prevail this time. The seventh work is the one that Yahweh prophesied will not be destroyed. He had already prophesied that the others would. Yeshua, he didn't come to bring peace on earth. He tells you that flat out. I didn't come to bring peace. I came to bring war between man, between a son and his father. Here the father is righteous, wanting his son to be righteous. So he comes to bring friction between them. That's how he did it. A daughter against her mother. That's what I came for. I'm separating my people from Satan the devil. Satan the devil is going to die. And so will all of those who will not be changed over by Yahweh. You can't see this spirit that's coming from this book of Yahweh that's doing that, but it's doing it. It's doing it. It's reaching from my mouth to your ears right now. What a miracle. How in the world could that be? I'm just sitting here wiggling my tongue and you're making words out of it. You think what a miracle that is for a man to talk? He didn't do that with the animals. Given to the people of the saints of Yahweh, whose kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all governments will serve and obey him. That is Yahweh. Well, he's speaking of the heavenly governments because that's what we're going to take over and promote. Now, look back to Revelations here now, Revelations 13, and I want to show you something that you probably didn't notice before. But I want you to notice it now because it's important for you to get this, because it's all laid out for you. Everything, including, that's included in Yahweh's salvation, is laid out for you in black and white to read and base your hopes on. There's nothing that Yahweh has said so far, including the nuclear bomb that he prophesied for this generation, which started in 1934. If you've read any of my newsletters, I bring that out in a bunch of them to prove that Yahweh's word is true. He prophesied that we'd have a way of burning the earth, and it started in 1934. The witness was born in 1934. The knowledge increase started in 1934. History says it. It's in black and white. He even inspired the historians to actually give the dates. So you can't deny it. It's there. The date of the nuclear bomb is there. I put it in my newsletters, and who said it? The date of the knowledge increase is there. I put that in my newsletters to prove to the world Yahweh's word stands true. He prophesied that, and the earliest he prophesied that was Deuteronomy 28, where he said, the heavens above you, the dust that is above you is going to come down upon you. It's going from explosions. The heavens are going to be brass. You're going to be burned. You're going to be burned if you go Satan and the God's way. Well, here now in verse 10, he said, if any man has an ear, let him hear this. He who is for captivity is going to go into captivity. You who bully, that's captivity. You bully a person into doing what you want, that's captivity. If you're for captivity, you're going to go into captivity. The same as those who are for war, killing, hitting, slapping. Yeshua included all of those things in war. Turn the other cheek, he said. Let them do the same thing to the other cheek. But don't you ever think about striking back. Don't think about revenge or retaliation. That's a perfection that Yahweh says you're going to come to. You're never going. This will prove to Yahweh, it'll also prove to heaven and earth, that you can fully rely on the fact there will never be another war. Heaven and earth can rely on the fact there will never be another war once you take over. Herein is the patience and the faith of the saints. Patience and the faith of the saints. Notice where that was put. No, it has nothing to do with the first 8 verses. Has nothing to do with the 15 verses after that. And he just placed it right in between them. Right in between. Now, if you notice, he fully tells you here in the first one about, starting with verse 1, the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire is the one, the fourth beast of Daniel 7, that came against the laws of Yahweh, that came against the name Yahweh. It came out of the 12 tribes. It didn't come from anyone else. And he tells you, this rose up, and I stood upon the sands of the sea, and I saw this beast rise up out of the sea. Revelation 17:15, I think it is, says the sea, the waters you saw, are multitudes, nations, and tongues. Now, if you put those two together, you'll know that these beasts here, the 1 through 4 of Daniel, those beasts rose up with multitudes, nations, and tongues. The second one didn't. But this first one did. But you have to put those two. This scripture, 13:1, and chapter 17. Let me read it to you. Chapter 17, and verse 15. I had that right. And he said to me, the waters, that's the sea that you saw where the beast rose up, the waters which you saw where the whore sits, the whore, he calls this a whore. He calls them that throughout the Holy Scriptures. The prophets called them that. Where the whore sits are peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Well, this Roman Empire, it rose up, started with one kingdom, then another kingdom joined it, a strong kingdom. Another kingdom was persuaded to join that one, and the fourth one was the strongest of all. And they had a mouthpiece they now call the Pope. They had a religion of God worshippers, of course, worshipped all the gods, and they, like Nimrod, who went from city to city, taking over and demanding tribute. Have you heard of that going on today? Surely anyone could put that together with what's taking place today. this same number 2 beast here is what it's speaking of. He had 10 horns. This is what Daniel shows too. This 4th beast had 10 horns and a mouthpiece and great authority. And notice verse 2, the last two lines, the dragon gave him, not Yahweh, but the dragon gave him his power, his throne, and his great authority. If you go back to Genesis 3, and you'll see Satan says, no, don't worship Yahweh. Be like the gods. Be evil like the gods. And they obeyed her. So it's Satan leading the crew here. That's the mother leading her God's sons and giving them their authority, their throne, their power, and their great authority. So Yahweh has set mankind in view of Satan and her gods, who seem to have quite a few followers in heaven. She only drew a third part of them. And meaning she has 2/3 left there. So that could at any moment turn with her. Great authority. And I saw one of the heads as it was wounded unto death. That's all shown in history right there. But she lived, and she regained her power, and they worshiped this dragon. They worshiped the dragon. That's what the first words there in Genesis 3. That word there, that verse, the 5 verses there teaches you Satan worship and God worship. Then first Yahaqob, the 3rd chapter, shows you that if you disobey Yahweh, if you refuse to accept this calling that you've gotten to his house, if you refuse it, then you will belong to Satan. The only way you can keep this calling and belong to Yahweh is Acts 3:19. Repent and be converted. Converted to practicing, 1 John 3, 4, 5, 7, and 8, practicing righteousness. Seeking first the righteousness of Yahweh and his kingdom. His kingdom, that is his house. That word is house of Yahweh. I will make you a kingdom of priests. Speaking to his house. And they worship the dragon. This fourth beast of Revelation 17 shows you 17 where she sits. There's no doubt about who it's speaking of. It shows you she sits on 7 hills. You can't find another one that sits on 7 hills that is leader of the kings of the earth, the religions of the earth. Every religion except the house of Yahweh teaches war. Every religion. There's 4,199 of them in this generation. And they're all getting their teaching from this one here, who follows the system of Nimrod, the Nimrod school, military school of training. And they worship the dragon. This is verse 4. That gave power unto the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who can make war with it? Who can make war? See, so you're back to the war again. He who is for war, verse 10, it's a must for them to be killed by war. He who is for war. Well, as even some of the commentators say, you know, they point out that the Vatican, the Roman Catholic Church, is for war. She's always been that way. She sends her soldiers out. The Apostle Shaul was one of them, remember? And he tells you this. He was one of their soldiers. He went out and he would find people who used the name of Yahweh, who kept the Sabbath and the feast days. Remember, they came in 70 AY, 70 AY, and killed all the people who came there to keep the feast of Yahweh. All who came to keep Passover, they killed them all, hoping they would wipe them out. And Yahweh allowed it. There was no more Jerusalem. They wiped it out. They plowed it like a field. And they moved the temple to Rome. It's now called the Sixtine Chapel. Okay, who is able to make war with him? This shows you their position and how they must die. Now, if you remember Malachi 4 and Revelations 13, verse 10, it's a must. It's a must, and that's what it's going to be. It won't be anything more or less. They're going to be killed by war. Those who are for war, it's a must that they be killed by their own doing. Just like it's a must for you to enter the kingdom of Yahweh by your own determination and into following righteousness. And there was given unto him a mouth. That's the Pope speaking great things. That's the mouth given in Daniel 7, speaking of the fourth beast, and blasphemies. Yes, they blaspheme the name of Yahweh even today. And power was given unto him to make war. Make war. Now here is the time period that was brought out by the great Kohan Elia Hyler Hawkins this morning in the news. The time period there. Make war for 42 months. That's 3.5 years. This is the last 3.5 years, but as Yeshua said in Matthew 24, verses 21 and 22, this is going to be the greatest of tribulation, and it's going to have to be cut short. It will have to be cut short, or Yahweh's prophecy for you would not come to pass. And nothing is going to harm you, brethren. You're going to see, you're going to go through this unless you turn against Yahweh. And he keeps telling you now there's a chance. He keeps saying, fear not. Remember that, meaning that you could turn and give in to fear. You better keep all this in mind. It's very short in coming now. They're working on this 3.5 years right now. It could already be. We were talking a few days ago, started talking about his speech, Elia and myself and others. But Trump's speech. See, he put the Oslo Accord was moving the embassy, the American embassy, from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. That was one of the requirements in the Oslo Accord. And he mentioned this. And he said that was the stumbling block. He said that was always a stumbling block. But he said now it's done. This stumbling block is removed from the table. So the peace treaty can go on now. Well, did it start there? There's an opportunity it did. We may have more. We'll see. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against Yahweh, to blaspheme his name, his house, and those who dwell in heaven. And that's exactly what goes on even today from the Vatican and her Christian daughters too. They turned in hatred against Yahweh's house when it was established. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. And authority was given unto him over all tribes, peoples, languages, and nations. Isn't that what we see today? Remember, Yahweh's hand is going to be on the neck of his enemies. All of them. They will praise him. They'll worship the Catholic Church. They'll worship Yahweh. They will pray. Your brothers will praise you. Remember Genesis 49. And all who dwell upon the earth will worship him, will serve him with this war, the wars. This is how they're serving him. That and with oil, the production of money from the ground, the black gold. And all who dwell upon the earth will worship him, whose names are not written from the foundation of the earth, of the world, in the book of life. Now, if you just stop to think about it, this was before mankind was made. From the foundations of the earth was long before Yahweh created man. But that was the beginning. And he said the plan was with him in the beginning to have these little bitty sperm that you couldn't see, the seed, the cell, the believe it or not, the atom. The atom is the smallest of all. And from that comes forth your body and your brain. And Yahweh, before the foundation now, he had this planned and set in law. Just like he does the cow, the horse, the dog, so forth. Set in law. And his plan was, though, to let man refuse his law, then show him for 6,000 years what takes place when you refuse his law. This is what you will bring upon yourself. Don't do this or you will have these STDs. You do this and you'll have them. Don't do this or you will have war. You'll be killing each other. And he told Satan, you caused this enmity between your children and my children. You have set enmity here between what you have done here. You have set it how? She had the power of creation at that time. He said, what you have done here, you put in their genes right here. This great enmity to start having war. And what you have put in them is a hatred for my people, my sons. But my sons are going to overcome. And then he said, but you are cursed. You're cursed for doing this. These same genes that you have manipulated here, get this, please. These same genes, these one-cell genes that you can't even see, you put in them this. Yahweh had already placed it in those cells, so man could make his own choice to choose and accept righteousness and get interested in the work of Yahweh. That work is mentioned throughout the Holy Scriptures. Be a part of it. Practice righteousness. From the foundation of the world in the book of life. Book of life? Yeah, it was planned too. Book of life, he said. It's even called the ordinance of life. The great doctrine of life in Acts, the 7th chapter. Well, now, let's see, where do we dwell upon the earth? Now, he throws in this verse 9 and 10 here. And he says, here's the way it's going to be. And then, now this was speaking of the one that killed his house out from Satan on up to here. In fact, Cain was the first pope. He is the first God worshiper, and that's what Catholic means. It means God worship. And this, from him came forth this beast here that's still in existence. It was wounded and did live, but it was wounded, so this book of Yahweh that it was holding captive would be turned loose and come to you and be here for this time period that Daniel actually showed with numbers. He actually showed this day when this book of Yahweh would be released and start coming back to the world, where it could be available even in the ends of the earth. That's what it's called, Oklahoma, the ends of the earth, to start his work that started in 1934. All of that was set by Yahweh. He is perfectly capable of protecting you. That's what I want you to understand. Now, that was the fourth beast that came up out of the earth, right there. The fourth beast, of which this next beast now says us be like the next one. And here we have a two-horned beast that speaks, verse 11, and I saw another beast coming up out of the earth. Remember the sea. The first one came up out of the sea, and these waters that you saw are multitudes, nations, and tongues. The second one comes up where there was no multitudes, nations, and tongues. It was the end of the earth, discovered in 1492. That's not many years before I was born. 1492, and I was born in 1934. And I saw another beast coming up out of the earth where there was no multitudes, nations, and tongues, and he had two horns, the Catholics and the Christians. Two horns, like a lamb. And that's the way they act. They have this pious, sanctimonious way of acting that makes you think this is holiness. Well, they could act all they want to while they're raping these children, and they could stand there doing the cross on their chest and everything while they're molesting, while they're killing, while they're making plans to take captive, to make war. Yes, looks don't count, brethren. I'd rather be running like Eliah than I had standing there putting on a show of righteousness when there's no righteousness in them. Well, I saw another, this beast, but notice he speaks like a dragon. That's about what you see coming forth right now, speaking like a dragon, and he exercises all the authority of the first beast. This authority that was given to the first beast, it was drawn up in their laws. They discarded Yahweh's laws and they started passing their own laws for the people. You can't do this. You can't teach the Holy Scriptures. That's one of them. You can't teach the Holy Scriptures in the public schools. You can teach Satan worship. You can teach God worship, which is Christmas, Halloween, Easter, New Year's, all of these pagan holidays. You can teach that in the schools, but you can't teach righteousness in the schools. And he exercised this authority of the first beast. Authority, the laws that they passed. That's what it's speaking of here. The United States got most of its laws from the Vatican when the colonies were settling and they were started forming a government here in what became the United States. They passed laws, and they're still passing laws. If you started from youth, you couldn't even read the amount of laws that they have on their books. And they pass laws to control people. And if you break this law, you go to jail or pay a fine. But they have so many thousand laws, millions and millions of them, and they cut them up into sections, and you have to have a special lawyer to do this and a special lawyer to handle this amount of laws. And they caused they exercised this authority by the same laws, the same system given in chapter 10 of Genesis, chapter 10 of Genesis, and called the Nimrod system of terror. The people obey the laws of the land because of terror right now. It's still going on. They're not united. They're not in unity. You obey Yahweh's laws because you're in unity with Yahweh. You're practicing Yahweh's laws. That's what makes you righteous. Praise Yahweh. Well, they practice laws because of the terror that they're threatened with if they don't. Go to jail. Well, they use these laws to put who they want to in jail, and they put judges in office who will put certain people in jail, but not Catholics. Right now we see a case before us where one is a Catholic. They're wanting him in the Supreme Court. Did you notice that? He's also a Jesuit. He was teaching in the Catholic schools when they pulled him out, and they're getting him ready to go to the Supreme Court to pass their laws because they are controlling this man. He's under their control. They got others on the Supreme Court now. It's already a majority of Catholics. It was already. Now they're trying to get another one in to pass their laws to swing the country in their direction. This is the way it works. The city does this. They pass laws to see to it that the poor who can't build a house and furnish it with water, sewer, and electricity. You can't live in a house in Abelin, Texas, unless it has water, sewer, and running water, sewer, and electric. Now, I saw how unfair this was, and that's the reason I opened the refugee camp in Abelin. It's still open. The people are clean. They live in a kind of a way that they lived in the 40 years. The great deacon, Tovia, has a film that we're trying to get it set up. I don't know if we got it set up or not. In the green tent that shows you some of this and the travel. You need to look at that because it will show you what we're going to go back to once gasoline is shut off from your car. In this feast, Yahweh has shown me that these automobiles, what a curse they are and what a blessing they are. They are a blessing because I can move back and forth quickly and get work done. But at the same time, they've really become a nuisance in this first few days before the feast, cars breaking down, and had people walking this morning, and everybody was horrified. And I said, well, that's the way I did when I was a child. I walked. Yeah, but they're a mile and a half from the sanctuary. When I was working in the State Board of Health laboratories, I had a perfectly fine car, but the snow started coming, and I didn't have the money to put antifreeze in the car, so I drained the car, parked it by my house, and the snow covered it up during the winter. It was about 1.5 feet of snow on the top, all over it. You couldn't even see it. But I walked to work. I never missed a day of work. But that's the way I was raised. I walked to work. I could have run to work. But I wasn't in that big a hurry, I think, at that time. Well, you got to get this, because this authority, it means laws, that they pass to get what they want done in a city or a county. They're trying to get laws passed now where you can't put a mobile home out here in the county, except in a place where they choose, I guess. where you can't sell land out here without so-and-so. They're trying to get that done. They're a little bit late, you know. We already got it done, but they're coming in behind us trying to pass these laws that they wish they'd had in motion before we got here. But this would stop. They'd never get this done, you know. I saw in Abelin where they were fighting laws, and of course the people who sold mobile homes, they hired attorneys who sold them, the businesses. And the ones who manufactured them, they sold them. They got attorneys, and they beat the case every time that this was brought up. But they did get it to where you couldn't keep a mobile home in a certain place in town, and you had to put it in a park. But that didn't work either. You know, they bought property at the outside of town, and then the city took them in, so they're still got mobile homes in town. So their laws are kind of worthless, but they're built to take advantage of someone else. The laws are based on that. Well, he exercised this second beast now with 2 horns that came up last, where there was no multitudes, nations, and tongues. That beast, the United States, 2 religions, run by 2 religions, Catholic and, of course, Christian. Well, he exercised the same authority as the first beast before him, and he caused the earth. Get this now, because here's where the war starts again. And this is what we're seeing right now take place. The house of Yahweh was built right here in verse 10. This is the work of Yahweh that is shown here, the faith of the saints, and what is going to take place in their time period. In this generation you are now living, see? Those who dwell upon the earth, they caused this beastly system here in the United States is causing. What do you think you see in Afghanistan, Iraq, Libya, and so on? You see this land being taken from the people by war, and you see democracy being, they call it democracy. But that too, they use it to their will, to whatever they want to use it for stealing or whatever. But it's not really democracy they're passing if they followed the word. That's like saying righteousness is raping babies or molesting women, as you see the same man that's running for Supreme Court judge is now accused of, and others are coming forth and accusing him. Well, there's a lot of that going on. I've written a letter showing that this molesting is going on all over the world, and you can't stop it by putting one man in jail. That doesn't help a bit. The practice is still there. The cause is still there. The cause is you didn't train your children, mothers and daddy. You didn't train your children in the laws of Yahweh. That's the reason your son is running for the Supreme Court right now. He was raping people back in his younger days when he should have been taught the laws of Yahweh. That's where you failed. That's where your grandparents failed and your great-grandparents. But it started with Adam and Eve, rebellion against Yahweh. So Yahweh said, if you're for war, it's a must. You've got to be killed by war. This is the only way. Those who dwell upon the earth, he causes to worship the first beast. He's causing them to follow their laws. The laws are the authority of the first beast. And he does great wonders, so that this beast right here creates the nuclear bomb that brings forth war from heaven. Look at that for yourself. Revelations 13:13. You should be able to remember that. Revelations 13:13. He makes fire come down from heaven. Well, of course, it's shown then, that right there shows you how they're going to die. It shows you that this fire that comes down from heaven, Revelations 18:17 and 18, shows you that fire is going to be a hell fire coming straight from Satan herself. She's the one that gave the authority for the wars. And of course, it shows that it's a 1 hour burning. Now, let me put this to the unbelievers right quickly. Again, you who can't believe, Yahweh prophesied his work would start in this generation. He prophesied the knowledge increase. He prophesied the nuclear war that would darken the sun and burn the earth. He prophesied all those things, burn the earth, but he even gave you a limit, 1 hour. I bring it out in the letters, the scientific reports. Many of them I brought out and put it in the newsletters, put it throughout the world in the newspapers. Yahweh prophesied this long before firecrackers was made, long before the atom was split brought forth this great power. Think of that. Your body is made up of atoms. The same atoms that you make the nuclear bomb from. In fact, everything on earth is made from atoms. But they found a way to harness this great power by splitting the atom and causing a chain reaction of explosions that don't cease. And this chain reaction is what they're going to use, and this is a must. They're going to have to do this. It's a must for them to kill themselves. Man, you brought forth war. Yahweh didn't bring forth war. He's telling you, follow this way of peace. So from man is going to come your destruction. Yahweh has nothing to do with it except he allows it. Satan is the one that's leading the wars. Yahweh doesn't lead wars. And when you, being in agreement with Yahweh and ruling as Yahweh rules, you're going to receive the authority. You're going to receive the authority now. You're not going to follow the authority of this beast or Satan. You're going to receive the authority to bring forth peace and learn war no more. May Yahweh bless you, and I'll turn the service back to the next speaker. I love you!